Hello. During this demo, you'll learn how to enable MyCap for an existing REDCap project and configure and schedule project instruments to be completed on MyCap. So to get started, we have a REDCap project that already exists, and maybe I've completed my main project settings, I've designed my data collection instruments, and now under Enable Optional Modules and Customizations, I see this Enable MyCap Participant Facing Mobile App button. At your institution, your REDCap administrator may have to approve your request to enable MyCap on your project, in which case you would get an email when it has been enabled. But for this demo, we'll do it automatically. So I'm going to press Enable. And now I see these MyCap instructions. So these just provide a little guidance on what to do next and how to configure MyCap and make sure that everything is ready to go. Once MyCap is enabled on your project, you'll see this new Design and Configure that MyCap app on your project setup checklist. So it becomes a new step. And here you can view MyCap initial instructions at any time. So you can come back and reference these just to make sure you understand what things mean and how to make sure you configure things and test it appropriately. So you can reference these at any time. I'm going to create a separate video for this MyCap app design process, and then the step for MyCap participant management. So stay tuned for those. But for this, we just want to show you how in your online designer, you can configure your REDCap instruments to be MyCap tasks. So REDCap instruments are called MyCap tasks if you enable them for MyCap. The first thing I wanted to point out is that the first instrument in your project cannot be enabled for MyCap. And that's because in order for a participant to join your project on their MyCap app, they have to have a record in your REDCap database. And their record is created based on the first instrument. So your first instrument could be as simple as just a form with the record ID. So that would be totally fine. In this project, I'm going to use this first instrument as this enrollment process to capture some demographics and actually capture consent. And as you can see here, when MyCap is enabled, you can still capture information as surveys, so that's totally fine. That works with MyCap. Another thing, before we start enabling some of your instruments to be MyCap tasks, I wanted to point out your MyCap options. This is a new menu that was added when you enabled MyCap. So this is where you can link to that app design, which I'm going to do a separate video for. And when you're here, you can also get back to your online designer. And then I want to talk to you about the baseline date. So any instrument that you enable as a MyCap task, by default, it's going to be scheduled based on the install date. So the install date is the date that a participant joined your project on their app. So you can schedule things based on the install date. So it's relative to the participant. But if participants in your project have an event that occurs and you want to set some of your tasks to be based on those events, like a discharge date. Maybe you have a discharge date and you want to schedule, a questionnaire that checks in with participants every 3 days, at day 3 after their discharge and day 7, or, maybe then once a week. So you could set that up. So that's what this baseline date setting is. So if you don't have the baseline date set up, it will look like this. But if you want to enable a baseline date, this pop-up will walk you through that. And basically what you do, if you do have maybe like a discharge date or an event that you want to trigger some of your tasks based on, it's going to ask you to select an existing field that's in one of your instruments to be the baseline date. So tell us what field do you want to count as your baseline date? And then these next questions ask you what the participant should see in the app if they are going to be completing your baseline date in the app. So again, if this were a discharge date, I might call this a discharge date. So I want this to be something the participant would recognize. And then it wants me to enter a yes or no question about whether the baseline date was today. So were you discharged from the hospital today? That's a yes or no question. And then if the participant says no, we want another question that asks for the desired date. So if it wasn't today, what date were you discharged from the hospital? If you want to include some instruction steps to really get specific and help your participant know what date this is, if they're not sure, or if you think they won't know what you mean, you could also include some instructions and add a title and some content, but we'll just leave that off just for simplicity's sake. So now I've configured my baseline date settings. You don't have to use that. So the first instrument that I would like to enable as a MyCap task for my project is this gratitude journal. So when I press enable, at the top, I'm going to get a couple of notices. So REDCap is just telling me that this data collection instrument has to be a repeating instrument if we want it to be captured in MyCap. And that's just so that participants can complete it multiple times if needed. So REDCap is automatically going to turn this into a repeatable instrument, even if it's just captured one time. So this is just automatically happening for you. And there's another notice that says that REDCap is basically going to add some fields to these instruments because it needs this information and you might want it later. So the fields that are going to be added, and these are not fields that your participants would see, but are things like the task start date, the task end date. So that can tell you how long it took to complete the task. You can also have a task schedule date, or it will be captured as well. So you can tell, this was scheduled on Monday, but they completed it Wednesday. So how accurate is this information? Things like that. And then there's also a really helpful supplemental data field. And this is going to capture information about the device that was used. In case you're curious about which types of devices your participants are using. It also helps with troubleshooting. So for this gratitude journal, that was my REDCap instrument name. It's going to pipe that in as my title that participants will see when they open MyCap. So I could edit that if I want. And then I can set the format, how I want the questions to appear for the participant, what should show when they complete the task, so the % complete. This is really helpful when there's a really long instrument. So if you allow sort of save and return later, it could say you're 60% complete. And so the participant would see that, and then they can click on that and complete the task whenever they're ready. There are lots of optional settings. You can allow retroactive completing, the save and return later. You can include an instruction step for participants if you want to provide some instructions before they get started, or some completion steps if you want to tell them something to do next, or just provide extra information after they complete an instrument. And then you get to the task schedule. So because we have that baseline date set, I have the option to schedule tasks based on the participant's install date or based on their baseline date. So whichever one is relevant. For this task, we're going to say that this is a task that I want to, it could be a one-time task. It could be an infinite task. So that means they could complete it as many times as they want. They could complete it 10 times a day. Or it could be repeating. So it could repeat daily. It could repeat weekly. You can select, every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks. It could repeat monthly. For this one, I'm going to say I want this to repeat daily. You could also pick a fixed schedule and just say, I want this to occur on whatever days. So I'm going to say, I want this to be a repeating daily task. And this is just a 2-week study. So I'm just going to, I only want this to occur for 14 days. I don't want the participant to keep getting pinged to do this task. So now I've got this set up to be scheduled every day for 14 days based on the date of install. So I'll save this. And the next instrument that I want to enable is this gratitude adjective checklist. So very similar process. We have these warnings at the top. I'll show you what these look like in the instrument too. These additional fields that were added. So I've got my task title. For this one, I'm going to schedule this one based on the baseline date. So maybe I want this to occur after the discharge date. I want it to occur on a fixed schedule. So I want it to be day 0. So their date of discharge, I want it to occur. And then a week later is when I want this one to occur. So I will save those changes. And now let's go look at our instrument really quick. So these two are enabled for MyCap. And so I just wanted to show you that these MyCap app fields were automatically added. Again, these do not appear for participants. They don't have the hidden action tag, but they don't need it. REDCap just knows, and MyCap knows not to display these fields to participants. There's a note to do not modify. So don't change these fields in any way or delete them. But if you accidentally do delete one, and you don't even know it, you will get a warning that tells you, oh, there's an issue. And if you just click on it, REDCap is so smart, and it tells you, oh, we got to make some changes for you because something's missing. And you can just click fix issue and it fixes it for you, and you don't even have to worry about it. So now you're all set. One more thing I want to show you is this active task. So you can add active tasks. This is just built, this is from a library from ResearchKit. So if I want to import some active tasks, these are things like that are based on the phone's or the device's sensors or their microphone or their speaker. So you could have participants submit data based on sort of the phone sensor, speakers, or microphone. So we have motor tasks, fitness tasks, cognition tasks. These are really fun. Speech, hearing, hand dexterity, and vision tasks. So for this, I'm going to add this tapping speed task, and I can see it will be available to participants who have Androids and Apple iOS devices. When I want to add this active task to my project, I can give it a name. I'll just call it my tapping task. And it's going to import it for me. And then I can do a little configuration. So again, I could edit the task title. There's not a lot that you can change about these because these are pre-built tasks that come from this ResearchKit library of tasks. But you could add a little information about the task if you want for this one. For this one, it has a duration of 20 seconds by default. You could change that to just 10 seconds. And then we'll get to the task schedule. So this one, again, you could base it on the install or the baseline date. I'll just do install, and I want this to also repeat every day for 14 days. Because again, we have a 2-week study. So I'm going to save that. And now you can see it added an instrument to my REDCap database. I'm going to move it up because I want it to occur after the gratitude journal. If these two occur on the same day, and they do, but I want it to occur before the adjective checklist when they occur on the same day. So this is sort of the order in which the instrument or the MyCap task will be presented to the participant. So now these are all the instruments that I wanted to enable for MyCap. Really important is this publish new MyCap version. So we're not done. We haven't done the app design, but I just want to go ahead and show you. I wanted to highlight this button so we can go ahead and publish a new version. This is really important. Anytime you add a question, remove a question, edit your response options, change your branching logic, add a new instrument, delete an instrument that's going to be captured in MyCap, you want to make sure that you publish a new MyCap version. So you can see now we're on version 3 because I had done a couple before I did this video. But if you press it again, no big deal, it's version 4. The important thing to know is you cannot over push that button. So, if in question, press publish a new MyCap version. Participants don't have to do anything. Anytime they open your project on their MyCap app, it pulls the current version. So you don't ever have to worry about whether they have the current version. You just have to make sure you publish any of the changes that you make. So the next thing that I would do is I'd probably go over to my app design and get started here, but I'm going to do that on a separate video. So thanks for watching, and look for more videos.